In the early hours of January 26th, a man calls 911 and says he found his girlfriend unresponsive in the living room. At first, it sounds like a tragic medical emergency, a routine call, a heartbreak no one could have stopped. But as investigators retrace the final hours of Sarah Harris, they begin to see something darker, a pattern, a history, and an act so extreme that it leads to a rare type of murder charge. One that applies when a person doesn't have to mean to kill, only to know their actions could kill and continue anyway. And the truth doesn't come from a confession. It comes from a family member who refuses to let the story end with overdose. Before we dive into this story, click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our detailed crime documentaries. It's still dark outside when dispatch answers the phone. A distressed man gives his name, James Ryan. He says his girlfriend isn't breathing and he's attempting compressions. Officers and medics are sent immediately. When they arrive, the scene feels heavy but straightforward. Sarah is on the floor. Medics are already working. And in the background, a steady rhythmic sound keeps time, the CPR metronome. That sound means hope. That sound means hope, one officer asks. Who are you, sir? James answers calmly, I'm her boyfriend. He looks shaken, but composed enough to talk. And at this moment, responders believe they already understand what happened. Near Sarah, first responders notice items that make them suspect drug use. To them, the cause appears clear, an apparent overdose. They continue life-saving efforts while officers begin asking James what led to this. James explains that the night before they ate dinner and watched TV. He says he went upstairs to bed late at night, and Sarah stayed downstairs on the couch. In the morning, he says he came down and found her unresponsive. He says he called 911 and tried to help. Then the conversation turns to Sarah's emotional state. James says she had been deeply sad, especially over family loss. And he also admits something important. He knew she had been using drugs. He says she had access through his workplace. He ran a local clinic, and that she had been taking substances even after he fired her. On the surface, the story still seems tragic, but not criminal. A vulnerable person spiraling. A partner who found her too late. But detectives are left with an uncomfortable question they don't voice out loud yet. If James knew what was happening, why did it continue? The CPR metronome keeps ticking, then suddenly it goes quiet. That silence changes everything. James collapses into grief as medics confirm Sarah has died. For a moment, the home becomes still, the kind of stillness that follows a life ending and everyone realizing nothing can undo it. Officers begin documenting the scene, preparing for the next steps, treating it as a suspected overdose death. Until someone arrives who shatters the fragile explanation. Sarah's mother, Tina, walks in. And she walks into the worst moment of her life. Tina pleads to see her daughter. Officers try to steady the situation, telling her she needs to calm down first. Through tears, Tina reveals she has already lost a child before. Her grief is layered, raw, uncontrollable, and immediate. Police gently explain what they found. And when they mention the items near Sarah, Tina's face changes. Something clicks for her. Fast. Then she does something that catches everyone off guard. She moves toward James and lashes out at him. Officers step in, separating them, confused, because Tina's reaction doesn't match the story they think they're in. If this was simply self-inflicted, why would a mother's instincts go straight to him? At the time, police don't fully understand it. But later, that moment will make terrifying sense. Days pass. Nothing obvious points to foul play. No clear suspects. No witnesses. No dramatic clue left behind. But procedures continue in the background. Because Sarah was believed to have had access to controlled substances, attention turns to James's clinic. A regulatory review begins. Records matter. Storage matters. Accountability matters. And then the medical findings return, results that force investigators to reconsider everything. It isn't the presence of drugs that shocks them, it's the context. The medical examiner's conclusions raise serious questions about whether Sarah could have done what was suggested by herself, in the way it was assumed. Investigators learned that Sarah was likely incapacitated when drugs entered her system, and that detail changes the entire case. This is no longer treated as a private tragedy. It becomes a homicide investigation. And James, the only other person known to be with her, moves from grieving boyfriend to the center of the timeline. Even with growing suspicion, investigators need proof. Weeks go by. And without direct evidence tying James to what happened that night, the case stalls. Then something unexpected happens. Sarah's sister, Rachel, walks into the police department with a discovery that changes everything. Rachel had been sorting through Sarah's belongings when she found her laptop. She guessed the password. And when she opened Sarah's private messages, she found a long, disturbing record pages and pages of conversations with James. Not just casual messages. Not just emotional back and forth. Investigators see messages that suggest encouragement, control, and instructions about drug use content that paints a pattern of influence and escalation. Most importantly, Rachel's discovery appears to show that James had previously crossed boundaries that should never be crossed. Rachel hands over a massive collection, described as a catalog of messages, creating a timeline of Sarah's decline and James's involvement. For detectives, it becomes the missing piece. Not a single gotcha moment, but a pattern consistent enough to act on. More than a month after Sarah's death, investigators locate James. They approach him in public. He's brought to the station and placed in an interrogation room. Detectives tell him they're investigating Sarah's death, what happened in his home. James reacts not with panic, but with distance. He says he'd be more willing to talk if he weren't under arrest. Then he asks for an attorney. The questioning stops. But before James is led away, another person enters the room, someone who makes it clear this isn't just a death investigation anymore. A de-diversion investigator introduces herself and explains the scope of her work: controlled substances, record-keeping, security, compliance. Then she delivers a blunt assessment. The substances at his facility weren't properly secured. Records were disorganized. Tracking was unclear. And with an arrest now in motion, consequences follow. His ability to prescribe or handle controlled substances is taken away. In that moment, two worlds collide: a criminal case and a professional system built to prevent exactly this kind of access and misuse. James is charged with second-degree depraved-heart murder, a charge that focuses not on premeditation but on reckless disregard for life. In simple terms, the prosecution doesn't have to prove he wanted Sarah dead. They only have to prove he knew his actions could kill and continued anyway. As the case develops, prosecutors describe a disturbing relationship dynamic: control, dependency, and worsening harm. They point to Sarah's visible decline and the evidence of ongoing access to powerful substances. They argue this wasn't an accident that happened in isolation. It was a pattern that escalated. And once Rachel's discovery is introduced, the story becomes hard for a jury to ignore. Not because of one message, but because of what the messages collectively suggest: influence, enabling, and a dangerous imbalance of power. At trial, the jury weighs what matters most: the medical findings, the timeline, the relationship evidence, and the digital record. They see a pattern. And in the end, James Ryan is found guilty. He is sentenced to 45 years in prison. A conviction built not just by investigators and experts, but by a sister who refused to accept a simple narrative and kept searching until she found the truth hiding in plain sight. This case leaves behind questions that don't fade easily. How many tragedies are labeled personal choices before anyone asks who was shaping those choices behind the scenes? How often do warning signs get dismissed because the easiest explanation is also the most comfortable? And how many families are forced to become investigators because, without their persistence, the truth might never surface? Sarah Harris was not a headline. She was a person. And the most haunting part of this story is how close it came to being written off as just another overdose. Until one person refused to let that be the ending. Thank you for watching. If you want more real cases told with respect, clarity, and accountability, subscribe to the channel. This is true crime and scam stories where every story has a heartbeat.